Good evening, doing the most media community. My name is Amanda, your host this evening. And I want to go ahead and get started by asking that everyone who tunes in, whether it's live or the replay, please drop where you're watching from in the comments while we're doing this discussion. Please be engaged, chat with us. We don't want to just be chatting amongst ourselves. We like questions, we like engagement. And
For
please
sure.
be respectful as you do this engagement because everyone who comes here is sharing their passion, purpose, and plan behind their business. And the goal is to support Black owned businesses, small businesses, for our lifestyle choices and not just as a trend. So please, let's get started with the little our spiel for the afternoon. So we make plans for everything in life. We make plans for birth. We make plans for living. We make plans for every single day. The thing that we often avoid or look over or miss by chance is planning for death. So today we have a chance to speak with Ashley Johnson. She is the owner of Loyal Hands in Georgia. And I don't want to take up much more of the time. I want her to tell you who she is and what she does.
Oh,
Ashley, thanks for joining.
yay. Hey, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Um, I definitely encourage questions because that's what I'm here for. But I am Ashley. I am the founder of Loyal Hands End of Life Doulas. So I know when you hear the word doula, you immediately think birth doula, and I often get that. But I am actually on the other spectrum, end of life, and that necessarily has a negative connotation. So I'm pretty much here to help you get in control of all of your affairs towards the end of life.
Okay. So I would you please explain to us how you got to this phase in your life of being end of life doula? This isn't something that many people probably even think about as a career or a life choice.
For sure, for sure. So this became what it is from actually just, in a nutshell, how can I just sum it up? Well, I've been in death care for over 10 years, and that being from working with being a medical liaison, working in the funeral home industry, as well as whole body donation. So from there, I was able to see there was a gap in treatment, and it lacked advocacy. So I just really wanted to be more hands on. And it really kicked it up a notch when my friend was diagnosed with colon cancer at the age of 27. And it's a lot of questions, a lot of unknowns that were happening. Instead of closing up all of her affairs, like, her car, her apartment, her clothes, her all of her affairs. And so once you see that gap and you step in and fill it, you see that it actually reduces a lot of stress and anxiety off of the family. So that's pretty much how I got into being an end of life doula.
So end of life doula isn't just for the person who is nearing the end of life. This is a service for it sounds like the full family.
It's a full family service. So, as well as we take care of people that are actually not at the end of life. So they just want to get their affairs in order, especially during this pandemic, a lot of unknowns and a lot of your own facing your own mortality or the possibility of your own mortality. A lot of people that were healthy just stepped up and said, "Hey, I want to get my affairs in order. I want to make sure my family is aware of my bank accounts, my social media, in case something was to happen. I want to nominate or have someone be an advocate for me if I have to go to the hospital and what kind of treatment that I want." So it necessarily, yes, we deal with end of life, but we also deal with people that are healthy, or even to the fact that people that are we work with birth doulas. So while you're giving birth, we are also with helping with the birth doula and creating your legacy project, because as we know, sometimes things don't go according to plan with our birthing, and certain things can happen. So I've worked with several pregnant women that just wanted to create a legacy just in case something happened and
Mhm.
their whole birthing process. So telling, and sharing with their unborn child that how to date, what is love, and things like that. It's actually very like glorifying and empowering.
Okay. So what are some of the additional things? I know you said that you help with end of life planning. What are some of those smaller things that people just don't think about when it comes to that planning? What are those things that people could be thinking about, especially as they think about maybe reaching out to an end of life doula? What are those things that they could be thinking to reach out to you about?
Okay. It's something as simple as just being your advocate, because I do have a background in the medical field. As an end of life doula, we handle it as a holistic, non medical. But as you know, sometimes things are talked over your head. Doctors can talk over your head, and you're sitting there nodding, but you actually don't get what they're saying. And they
Mhm.
actually don't take time to actually say, hey, do you get what I'm saying? So we're just there to be their advocate. So we help out with your advanced care planning, your training for your caregivers. So sometimes if we get a client that is terminally ill, we're explaining the steps of the dying process with the family, because a lot of times it's not the person that's dying that has um, that needs to cope with it. It's a lot of time it's their family. So as we empower you with as much education as possible, so you don't feel the stress and anxiety. That's very, very big. Um, Other than that, we help create a support plan at the time of death. So we want to make sure everything falls into place. So from your funeral arrangements, what do you, if you want to be home with your family and you want a ritual performed with your family, that's all planned out ahead of time. And also just being your companion and helping your caregivers, because as you know, caregivers experience burnout. They're human as well, so they experience this burnout. And we're there for the caregivers to give them a little break to actually be themselves and be human. If they want to go get their nails done or they want to take a nap, uninterrupted nap, we're there. My favorite thing is creating a legacy project. Hands down, I love creating legacy projects because they can be so creative. It is you, and everybody is different. So everybody's legacy project is a little bit different. And so I love that. As well as we offer things like therapeutic music and um, social visits with pets, because sometimes pets actually help your more like how you feel in your morale. So it's a variety of things that and services that we provide outside of just your will and your HIPAA and things like that, like the important legal documents. Yes, we will provide those, and we work with lawyers to make sure that our legal documents are up to par.
So
Um,
this covers all the aspects, the legal,
right,
the things that we wouldn't think to think of on our own.
right,
They're definitely probably there in law, and our families would encounter those things.
for sure.
You
Yes.
also mentioned something about having end of life rituals or certain things that people may want to have take place. That
Hmm.
takes a special touch and a special care to be culturally aware and remain humble in that. Would you speak a little bit about that, the processes in different?
Hello. Sorry,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
kind of froze a little bit.
Sorry
So
about that.
did I freeze or was? I did hear a little bit about the rituals and speak
Yes.
about the process of that.
Yes, like what does that look like when someone requests a ritual and how maybe you would go about advocating? Because sometimes I know that there's, red tape at hospitals or things that aren't allowed or so how do you kind of work in that situation?
Okay, so that's definitely one of our initial consultations. Once we are brought on board to help you and your family, we're asking those questions, those hard, heavy hitting questions like, religion. And because sometimes people outside, sometimes um, they are deemed a Christian, but they're actually practice Catholic. Like they're actually a practicing Catholic, like you know what I mean. And we ask those questions because we want to honor it. So if there's rituals, we we literally take that into perspective to make sure that it's honored, because you only get one time to transition. So with that one time, we want to execute it the way you want it done, as as legal and logistically as possible. So if there is a practice or something, sometimes it's a shaman that needs to be brought in. We're talking with a hospital, and we're talking with hospice and palliative care. And if it's at home, it's a lot better because there's not a lot of resistance. But we are talking in hands on and say, hey, you know, maybe we don't have to light an incense, but we have candles, like or candles that non flickering. I was like they're the flickering candles, so we don't have to actually light them. And we will need privacy. and to honor that space for that specific client of ours. So it's definitely a lot of communication, a lot of transparency. We have to. It's like what, as if I would say, like, you had to treat it as if it's yours, your death or your family member's death. So whatever they want, we want to know as much information to make sure that we execute it.
And I'm sure that the families appreciate that utmost level of care and respect for the things that they want as
Right.
everyone enters
For
that.
sure. You have to go in here open minded, because sometimes religions are different from yours. And you have to honor them as if they are yours, non-biased. There sometimes the cultures are just different from yours. And what they want within reason, obviously nothing like racist or anything like that, but you make sure to try to honor it.
Definitely. There's definitely respect even in dying and in death.
Right.
I know I read something. There's a comment about being death positive. Can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be death positive or to hold a death positive perspective?
Yes. So with the whole death positive perspective, you are pretty much taking in control of your death, and you're spinning that negative narrative that death is sad and morbid, and embracing actually all types of emotions and normalizing that conversation and not making it such a taboo movement or a taboo topic. So it's helping decrease that anxiety and making it more universal. It's literally all about the positivity surrounding death. So once you feel like you're empowered about something, you really want to share it. Like, you really want to make it your own, and you're comfortable with it. So that's the whole movement behind being just death positive.
Okay. Let me ask this, does that death positive movement, does it help people when as they approach that end of life or even as their family members approach that time frame? Does that reframing of looking at death, does that help any?
Yes, but you got to remember, we've been trained for so long to have this narrative. So immediately it takes some time it to actually embrace that type of mentality, to actually go through a whole process and say, you know what, like 10 times out of 10, everybody is going to die. And once you start to embrace that, then which is not easy, it's not easy. But once you do start to embrace it, it's like, it's yours. This is your life. I have control over it. I have my final say of what I want at the end. Who can speak at my funeral? What colors I want? Like, and the ambiance in the room that I'm in. Sometimes people want like balloon awnings or types of music that are played, or they want their pet. So we can work with the hospice and palliative care units to have their pet right next to them while they transition. It is yours. And that's what I want people to take. Like, this is yours. Don't let like a what we've been taught take away from what we are actually privy to.
It sounds like death doesn't just have to happen to us. We can definitely be very planful and
Right.
mindful in that process.
Yeah.
So dealing with death is never easy at all, but how do you balance that out? The dealing with lots of deaths and caring for those around you, and not just you, but how would anyone, how would you recommend that someone deal with that process?
I would definitely say embrace all emotions. Um, you have to, just like with life, you embrace all emotions, from having great days to having horrible days. You're being depressed one day. That's just how with the whole end of life process as well. We have to embrace it all. So there's times where you get your initial diagnosis and you're in denial. Embrace it. Denial is gonna, but actually now we're gonna talk about the up times. Like, what's your life legacy? Like, let's talk about your life. We're not gonna stay stuck there. So we have to. I like a lot of people like to deny all aspects, to laugh, to cry, and
Mhm.
things like that. And I'm like, no. If you gotta scream, scream. I don't you shouldn't care what anybody else says. Like, this is how you process things, and you shouldn't have to uh, shrink yourself to actually make sure that you fit in with what everybody else is saying.
You said a lot
So,
there. Nobody should have to shrink themselves. We should definitely be able to feel what we feel as we feel it and be real in that.
right.
I'll speak to COVID-19. It's changed so much for all of us. It's even changed the hospital setting, I'm sure hospice care and the whole 9 yards. What does that look like now, and how do you see people responding to that? I know you said there's more responsibility and people are reaching out and handling business, but how has COVID-19 impacted that?
Honestly, COVID-19 was a reminder that life can change at any instant. It can change. And so people are being forced to consider their own mortality and that it can happen at any time. Usually we think like, oh, we don't think about when we get into a car that an accident can happen. We usually think contribute death to terminal diagnosis or getting old. And COVID-19 lets you know that anybody, young, old, whatever demographic, it can affect you. So with us, we took a stance back because now we want to be proactive. This, like, as being an end of life doula, you are always trying to have emotional and mental support, and for us it was like getting into the community. So we wanted to make sure that we had avenues to share for um, people to reach out or have emotional support, mental support, and created a whole platform for people to go to so they can actually uh, de-stress and things like that. Also, being hands on the community to get out there and be advocates and go grocery shopping for people that were afraid to go grocery shopping. You remember what panic buying happened? Everybody, toilet paper, toilet paper.
You missed it for a while. It was just gone.
But yeah, so you have families that are out there already and they have anxiety about going out. So we mask up and we're going out, we're going shopping because this is all about humanity at the end of the day. This is like, what would you want for you if you were in their situation? So COVID-19, it put it out there for people to actually talk about it. They created that conversation like, okay, if I were to get it, what's going to happen next? And a lot of people, they don't know what's going to happen next because we never talk about the death and that type of thing like that. So that's what we as with Loyal Hands, our doulas have seen. A lot of people being forced to actually talk about it. For us, we are still able to have our one-on-ones with our clients because we have our PPE and things like that. And we also do temperature checks and we have great relationships with our hospitals. Each one of, like, because we are in different locations around the nation. So each one of us, we developed those relationships before COVID. And now that it's all happened, we're able to keep those relationships going.
That's an amazing thing. I know so many
Right.
relationships between agencies have died off because of COVID. It's nice to know that some are still strong and they're sticking it out, especially this one, because it is
Right.
for the people.
A
And
lot of people are being in nursing homes and hospitals by themselves. Just that whole mental psyche of feeling alone and nobody to advocate for you. It's a downer in itself. So just knowing that, a doula and if your doula is going to be coming by just to be your companion for just a few hours, every Thursday. It's something to look forward to. It's something to say, hey, I have a companion out here that's going to be looking out for me. So if anybody, like, I'm not getting fed appropriately, or
mhm,
they're not monitoring my dietary needs or something like that, I can actually speak with somebody and they're going to unbiasedly vouch for me.
gotcha. That's amazing because at the end,
Right.
there's always a need for an advocate, someone who understands the systems that we are working within or we're living in at the moment. And when people are living in their life, whether that's in a hospice setting or a hospital, that becomes all the more important for sure.
Right. It does, because a lot of times with when you talk about death and dying, um, I like to say, like, a lot of people and a lot of families, they are vulnerable. And when you're vulnerable, and especially in a state like you're handling affairs that haven't been taken care of beforehand, and that stress and that anxiety, a lot of times you run the risk of being taken advantage of. And it can be something from your family members. So we deal with a lot of families that are like, well, he didn't leave a will. So, I think I want this, I want his ring. And then there's another cousin that wants that ring. And so you're dealing with a lot of opportunities that a family can get taken advantage of. So even with funeral homes and insurance policies, Sometimes insurance policies, they don't pay out like they should. So it's a for me, we go back and we look at it, we talk to our lawyers and we fine print it. And we're like, no, people's like, I have life insurance policy, I should be fine. Yes, essentially. But sometimes it doesn't work out in what we intended the life insurance policy to be. And even with funeral homes, sometimes like the trick of the trade is a lot of times funeral homes don't disclose that you don't, it's not lawful. Like you don't have to be embalmed. A lot of people think like, oh, my family members, so now they're being charged the extra, you know, $500 to $1,500 for an embalming. And it's not the case. But they don't know any better because this is what they've been taught. So we, as an end of life doula, I can go in there and I'm like, hey, you know, your loved one transitioned in the hospital. We can organize so that loved one can be brought back to their home, and the family can come home and visit that loved one in their bed setting. A lot of people don't know that that's an option, and it's a legal option. So it's like, hey, sometimes you don't want to see your loved one in their last moment with tubes and everything on them. Nope, we can organize it. We'll get them home. We'll, you can give them a bath and give all essential oils on them. Do whatever rituals you want, and then we'll have the funeral home come pick them up. So it's like those little small things that are not necessarily mainstream
No, not.
to that actually to share with everybody.
I mean, you just right there. I mean, you've named like 3 or 4 additional entities that families come into contact with just because someone has passed away. I mean, you're talking
Mm-hmm.
about legal teams, you're talking about, whether it's wills or, property and estate. You're talking about funeral homes, transporting the body, whatever the case may be, and understanding what is necessary and what needs to by law happen, and what things are more optional and don't necessarily need to happen, and you have choice in that, and that's
Right.
amazing. The miseducation of the people, I tell you.
Right.
Thank
And
you
that's
for
the thing. It's like I want to give you all the options. Like how many options veterans actually have? We also think like, oh, they get a few perks at the end of life. No. You can get a whole 21 gun salute. Like, no. And if that is the case, we need to honor that. We need to talk about it. We talk about it with your family. What exactly do you what exactly do you want? Because that's my job to make sure that I can actually fulfill it. There's times where I'm human and life happens where you can't fulfill everything. Like, I can't bring you a pink zebra. But, but I we definitely go all out because if it were me, and that's what I would want. I tell you, it's all about humanity and empathy. Being an end of life doula is like giving all of you to make sure somebody else has like a pleasant, a death positive experience. That's it. I don't want people to, when they hear the word death, they see a trauma, because that's what a lot of people experience. They experience the whole trauma, and so when that happens, they're like, mm-mm, I don't want to talk about it. No, I want to be like, when a terminal diagnosis or something traumatic does happen, it's like, okay, everything, we have a flow. We're able to process this.
And you talk about a real trigger right there. There are some lifelong avoiders when it comes to talking about death. Death comes
Mm-hmm.
up and they run the other way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
Mm-hmm.
hoping
Mm-hmm.
that this conversation today hopefully helps some people come to a more comfortable point of talking with their family and communicating those needs, those wishes, those desires for end of life, because it's important, especially now, like you said, with COVID-19, because it's changed a great deal of how we deal with things.
Right.
If you had to, and I know this is like
Mm-hmm.
a big ask, but if you had
Yep.
to summarize why, what the purpose or the intentions of end of life planning are for people, so that people really understand and want to take this point away and take it home, and maybe even use this as part of bringing up the conversation, what would maybe be the main purpose in having end of life services, in your opinion?
Oh, in my opinion, honestly, is advocacy. Because as you saw in 2020, a lot of people lacked advocacy and they were alive and well. So just think about it. Even if we're going to go to statistics with COVID-19, a lot of BIPOC, Black Indigenous people of color, they actually did not receive the same treatment as non-BIPOCs. And from the police brutality, and having advocacy. That is so important. That is so human. And things that you just don't know that somebody else does know, and they have a network of people that will advocate for you. And it's just not myself, and it's just not the other doulas a part of Loyal Hands. We have a whole network that we literally lean on. If I'm not for sure, like I told you, like I work with doctors. We have a team of law professionals that overlook our documents. Like, it's just being somebody that you can depend on to handle your affairs for your end of life, and making sure that they get executed. And a lot of times we try to avoid probate, because probate can take months, years, decades if somebody contests them. So it's like getting things in order, so when you transition, that's not something that's over your head. Because a lot of people, dealing with people with end of life, when they're transitioning, they're not necessarily holding on for themselves. They're holding on because they see their wife is stressing. And, where's the money to pay for the funeral? Or they see people arguing over superficial things that that's holding them here. So they're just holding on and helping other people cope. So just knowing that when you transition, to have all of your affairs in order, that you're helping your family more than anything. So they don't have to play the guessing game and what you would like and how you would like to be honored.
That's amazing because nobody should have to stress like that or try to hold on
Yeah,
that much
we've
longer.
we've all been through
Mhm.
our fair share of having something traumatic or an impactful death upon us that's left an imprint. And sometimes it's not the best imprint. It's like, they didn't have the best, bedside care, or you knew that they were in pain. And or they you like with COVID-19, like I said, like there's a lot of people that have nobody because of this pandemic. We can't even go into their rooms or necessarily their floors. And we're working with hospitals to make sure that they can get at least some type of visual contact with their families. So it's a lot of Zoom calls where you can have a computer or a tablet in front so the family can actually see them and they can be in that moment. But a lot of times it's not having somebody there. It's a mental psyche. You feel alone and alienated. So that's something that, being an end of life doula, we want to reduce as much as possible.
As an end of life doula, are there any barriers that you've maybe encountered in trying to provide the end of life services? And can you speak a little bit to that? Because I know there's like with different settings and different systems, I know that there can be some barriers from time to time.
Yeah, I definitely mentioned the COVID-19 being a barrier for us to actually get into the hospital. But with that barrier, we try to find options, because you know there because if one door closes, there's another door. There's a back door. There's a window. You can make some type of connection happen. Um, Dealing with families that are arguing. And so when I say with that, sometimes you have a caregiver that overgives, and there's four children, but only the middle child is taking care of the mother that is aging and about to transition. And so there's a lot of anxiety, like, not even anxiety, there's a lot of resentment that middle child, because she's burnt out and nobody's there to help her and or get feedback. They're just like, oh, how's mom doing, and that's it. And so just to bring the family together to educate them, like, hey, it's a collaborative effort. Your mom is actually just the struggle and the anxiety that she gets knowing that her kids are not being um, cooperating at this moment when she needs them the most. It's just being there to actually build that bridge for them. Is That's definitely one of the stress, like a stressor that I experience a lot, is literally getting the families to collaborate and work together at the end of life. And you have to honor that, because sometimes people are afraid of death. And so they don't want to see their mom like that. And I have to explain to the caregiver, like, this is why. And they don't know how to communicate that. They just, what they do know is to run away. And they also have emotions, and, just to make them feel that they aren't alone. So,
Are
yeah.
there times when you all were referred to, like, for we will make a referral to possibly like counseling or anything of that nature if the problems or issues seem to become that big or that great.
Yes. So, like I said, we definitely work with a legal team who has a mediator.
Right.
So that if it gets too big for myself or any other doula, we definitely refer them to our mediator. And the mediator does virtual consultations as well. But the trick is with virtual is that trying to get them all there. Because somebody's like, nope, now I'm not getting on the online and
Not
stuff like
today.
that. Right. And it's like, no, we're trying to fix a problem. Um, so we definitely have mediators that'll step in for us.
I'm sure that's needed sometimes.
Yeah, because I have to remind a lot of families or caregivers that when you're speaking, and sometimes you think that your loved one is, out of it. They're just laying there, but actually hearing is the last thing the last sense to actually go. So even though they might not, they might can't, the touch and every other sense is kind of faded away, they can still hear you. So just imagine just putting yourself in that situation to say like, hey, if you're laying down in your fan, you hear people talking about you and there's nothing that you could do, like, or talking negative and negative thoughts or, anxieties around you. So I'm like, I have to instruct them like, hey, arguments, let's move them outside the room. Let's honor this space for your loved one because like it's not an appropriate time.
Definitely, that's understandable, and I'm glad that there's somebody there to do that. 'Cause I'm sure there's been some incidences, and
Oh
again, those traumatic
yes.
experiences that we all tend to hold on
Yes.
to for far longer than they need to be held on to. So,
Right.
only
At the
there's
end of life, a lot of people want to be, they're asking for forgiveness. That's a lot of things. They're like, you know what, 20 years ago, this happened. I really want to find this person and tell them that I'm sorry. Or if they want to be forget, like they want to either be forgiven or ask somebody like, hey, you wronged me. I want to, before I transition, I want us to be on at least decent terms, you know, things like that.
wow. So, planning is a major part of anything that we do. What are some of the plans that you have for Loyal Hands as you go forward into the future?
Um, Definitely a lot of education because when you know better, you do better. And that's in every aspect. It's kind of like you put it in a perspective when you are preparing for your SAT. When you preparing your studying and you get as much knowledge as you can, you feel a lot more comfortable when it presents itself. When you take that test, so you're like, okay, I know the strategies, this, and that. Education is key. So as many people that I can educate about the steps of dying, or hey, legal aspects of it all, just having a will, or any little tricks of the trade that come about, that's definitely what like Loyal Hands is here to do. Is just to educate and be an advocate for the people, for humanity, because as you see, a lot of things is like you look like you're looking at cartoons, some sci-fi movie in modern day. 2020 was like, is this a real thing? Like,
Yeah,
what can happen will happen. Like, I was ready for the zombie apocalypse.
it
Real
was kind of
talk.
perfect. It was weird.
It was I was ready. I would tell people, hey man, you just never know. Don't doubt it. I'm like, every day is something new. So it's just to help people be comfortable with that fear. Because if you reduce our another example as I give is that you remember the movie Scream?
Yes.
Okay, so in that movie Scream, we never knew the killer. We never knew the killer the whole movie. So the whole time we have anxiety and we're like, who is it? And everything. But once the killer was revealed, we were all calm. We're like, oh, it was the fisherman. It was this. Like, it's calm. And to me, it relates to the whole death and dying because it's similar. Like, once we find out the stages and everything like that, you get a lot more calmer because you're just like, okay, it's going to happen. Like, we are all going to transition. And once we start to talk about it, it's like, how, now that we got that out the way, let's talk about living instead of existing. Because a lot of people, we're just existing. So now that we got it out the way, now let's live. Let's live our best life. Like, let's go, let's push ourselves to do something that we thought that was unattainable.
Existing in the fear of the unknown, for sure.
Hmm.
It's a real thing.
Hmm.
If you had to say what separates Loyal Hands from other end of life doulas, what would you say sets the service apart and would be a reason for someone to reach out and contact?
Oh man, I would say like our team of doulas, at the moment, we're all millennials. Like that is the thing, and it's great because you have the techie aspect of it all. So we're able to then come up with the creative aspects to actually reach the people. And a lot of people always, it grounds me because I'm like, a lot of people like millennials are lazy. No, like millennials, I'm like, you met the wrong millennial. But I think right now at this moment, it is being a team of millennials, help sets us apart. Because to me, I'm like, we have a generation of, like, we're in between with the elders and then helping and pulling and upgrading the people underneath us. Like we're in that middle range. So I love that aspect, and I think that's really what sets us apart because we're able to relate. A lot of people like Generation X or whatever, Generation Y, I believe it's under millennials. Don't quote me. And don't quote me, but
Yeah.
I to be like leaders for that, to be a set and a role model, but also knowing that the the 60 and above generation, and to know that we're helping them because statistically, like, there's a lot of people that are the baby boomers. There's a significant amount of baby boomers, but there's not a significant amount of caretakers for said baby boomers.
Yeah.
So it's an uneven proportion. So it's like it's only going to get a little bit wider as well. So just knowing that there are doulas and other doulas out there to actually like help baby boomers, because I really want to tell you, I forgot the actual numbers, but it's an astronomical number that it's like, wow, um, there's not enough caretakers and like hands on to actually take care of them once they really approach like the end of life.
It sounds like millennials are uniquely positioned to do this work, but definitely undermanned, so to speak,
Yeah.
in the numbers game.
For sure.
I appreciate you sharing that. I mean, even if we drop that in the comments, you say if you can get me that, I will drop that information in the comments for sure. Because it's important. People need to know there's that level of lack between, the older generation and the millennials because it's real and it's going to start having some real impact in
It's
these coming
right.
years.
A lot of people don't understand the gap that is in hospice. Like when people's like what? Well, I want to do hospice. That's great. We work with hospice, but hospice is medical. So they're only limited to like 2 hours a day. So they're coming in there within those like 2 hours span, within your insurance pays for, um, to do vitals and pain management and things like that. So they're not actually really honing in on you, honing in on your family.
It
Like,
sounds like a more rigid service. Hospice is a lot
right,
more rigid.
right. So I'm able to come there. I'm able to survey your house quickly and say like, hey, I see dishes over there. So, um, we bring like a foot massage. So I'm like, hey, put some essential oils, Epsom salt in here. I'm telling the caregiver to relax, rest. I'm going to go ahead and wash these dishes. Or I already know your dietary needs or what is not acceptable. And let's get grocery and let's do things like that because those are human.
Yeah.
Those are a part of human, that's something that hospice wouldn't do. And it's because of the insurance and the legality of it all.
And things that people forget to do when their lives get busy in that transition time frame. So having someone to remind you and kind of help keep you in that self-care phase, and that's important.
Right. You can't pour from an empty cup. I always have to remind a caregiver, you cannot. Even being an end of life doula, I know that if I am reaching a brink, I also need self care. We have techniques for self care. We have like work with mental health professionals because when we become your end of life doula, especially if we get to a terminal, like obviously we establish relationship with people that are healthy and people that have actually lost pets. Like we establish those types of relationships. But if it's a terminal diagnosis and we're coming in and we're actually really hands on with the family, we become family. Like I'm there, 12 hours a day. I'm talking with your family. I am a part of your family now. And so when you actually do transition, I've been with you for a while. And so it affects me as well. So I have to like take some time and, ground myself, take a bath and, remind myself how precious life is and the gift that life is, to actually refill myself so I can give to another family.
Definitely. Got to be able to recharge the batteries.
Right. It's that's very crucial.
I know end of life doula work is still a fairly new practice. And
Mhm.
what is some advice you would maybe give a family who is seeking out end of life services?
Yes. Okay. So it definitely is a fairly new practice, or I would say a fairly new name. People have been practicing this, especially before time in other in other cultures other than the Western culture. Like now, it's like becoming more popularized in the Western culture, but this is something that's been going on, but not necessarily with the name end of life doula or death doula or death midwife.
Yeah,
People have just been, doing the task without actually the name. Um, but when a family is actually looking for an end of life doula, what I would definitely recommend is that they go to look for a train. They interview their doula, like you do your doctors. I know for sure that I interview my doctors, just to see if our chemistry is going to match. Because what good is it having a top ranked doctor if your chemistry doesn't match? He's gonna be like, okay, I'm just gonna do my job, but is he gonna go above and beyond if he sees something? So I would totally say like interview your doula and make sure that they have experience, a hands-on experience. It could be from volunteer services with hospices, palliative cares, hospitals, one-on-one, um, and get some training. Because yes, it is not being an end-of-life doula. It's not federally mandated training, but I would totally recommend, as someone is interested, to find a doula that's actually gone through some training, to actually know the ins and outs for assisting families. Like with Loyal Hands, we make sure all of that. We make sure our doulas are trained and certified. We make sure our doulas have experience. Also, including in that, there's a national proficiency test for end of life doulas, and we make sure if you're going to be an end of life doula with Loyal Hands, you have to pass it, that proficiency test, and that covers like all scopes of end of life. So it's you. We set the bar high because this is what you will want for yourself. I would want somebody that's coming in my loved one's life that's trained. I feel your energy and you are compassionate and empathetic to my situation. So that's what I would say. And there's a website if people, obviously you can Google end of life doula in your area, but I would totally recommend people if they were interested.
uh-oh. Froze for a second. What was the website?
Oh, no, it is the National End of Life Doula Alliance. And they can find doulas in their area. So usually if someone contacts Loyal Hands, and if we'll do a virtual consultation because of COVID and things like that, sometimes I'm here and they're calling from Wisconsin and they want to do, there's a lot of things I can do digitally, as well. And yes, we do travel. Yes, we still, especially since the travel is letting up, we'll get out there and we'll travel to you. Especially if you have that, no, I want to work with you. Like, okay, cool, let's make it happen. Um, but in the case of if that's not an option, you get on the website, National End of Life Doula Alliance, and you can find doulas in your area that cater to you, and you interview them. That's what I would tell people: interview them. You want them to be as professional and as experienced, because this is, you only get one time. So you want that, you want fireworks to happen to me, and that's what I'm like, what I want fireworks. I want an experience. I just
Yeah,
don't want to like an event. It happened. No, I want a real deal full experience. So that's what I want to make sure that people have.
thank you for that. That's amazing, and it's an amazing thing that you all are able to meet people where they are. As much as possible,
Mm-hmm.
considering all the different barriers to that too.
Right.
Is there anything that you would like to share with us that maybe we did not cover in any of the questions? Just something that you're thinking is really important that the people should know for the cause and for the culture?
Oh, anything off the top of my head is to get a conversation started. And it doesn't necessarily have to be, that doesn't have to necessarily have to be morbid. It's just to get it started. Even for my situation, when my friend transitioned from colon cancer, that conversation started with me talking to my family about, like, hey, we talk about breast cancer a lot. How, does anybody in our family have colon cancer? In that conversation, I was able to learn 2 generations back that somebody transitioned from colon cancer. That honestly, if I didn't have this conversation, I wouldn't have had this knowledge to move forward. Um, so I say for everybody, just that, I applaud people that actually have it. If they come to me, I'm like, I applaud you. You already took the first step. That's the hardest thing to do. You now that we're here, even if you're healthy, that's the hardest thing to do is talk about the end. We hate to when we get to the end of a movie, the end of a book, especially if it's a good one. We hate it. So
That finality.
I'm like, thank you for taking that step to talk to me about the end. So let's do it. Let's do it to cater it to more to you. Um, so yeah, that is something I want to leave people with. Like, just to have those conversations. And just because you talk about death doesn't mean it's going to happen. You know what I mean?
Right.
Just because I talk about kids doesn't mean I'm going to have like a crazy amount of them. You know what I mean? Like,
No jinxes there.
right. There's nothing there. We're not manifesting it to come upon us, but we're just talking about it.
Definitely.
So,
So
yeah.
if anybody who's watching wants to reach out, is there a website? Is there a YouTube or any social media handles? I will make sure that they're all
Yeah.
included.
Yeah, for sure. I'm here to answer any and all questions. I am an open book. Like I told you, I'm an advocate. So I will talk to you until my face turns blue because I want to make sure that everything lines up. Where people can reach us at, we have a website. It's loyal-hands.com. On Instagram, it is loyal dot, like just a period, dot hands. Um, we have a YouTube, and that's Loyal Hands as well. And I believe we have a Pinterest too, because I believe we have a Pinterest and it's Loyal Hands, but don't quote me. And
Definitely.
also a Facebook. We have our Facebook too, and that's Loyal Hands.
And I would encourage anybody to go check out the YouTube. I know I've been on there and watched a few of the videos and
Yeah.
caught some education and some re-information, honestly, that helps out so much. And I can appreciate all that you do and all of the end of life doulas do, even in this new title, since it's been
Mm-hmm.
around for forever.
Yeah, I'm telling you, you can just as creative and explosive that your life can be. That's exactly what you can do for end of life. It doesn't have to be dull and morbid. We definitely, certain things for us, we have parties. It's like, sometimes for people, they get their diagnosis and before they want to smell their flowers while they can. And so they're like, hey, we want to host a party. And we put together a party and we call them an awake. Not just like, not your wake, but you're awake. So they can hear those speeches from their loved ones and their friends, and they can smell those flowers and actually receive them and give feedback and appreciation. And usually we document that. Like, we're recording it because, later on, you never know, you may need that 1 minute to
Mhm.
say, like, hey, man, I miss my aunt. You play it back and you're like, wow, look at that energy. Like, what a time to be alive. So it's all like we document it because these are memories, and these are memories that you can pass on. And I'm telling you, it's a legacy, a legacy. I love legacies.
Wow. This is a lot of really great information. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing
For
all of that
sure.
information. Anyone who reaches out, I will be sure to get them in contact with you or at least
For
get your
sure.
contact information. So thank you for joining us. And everyone who watched tonight, thank you all for joining us. And honestly, there will be no feature tomorrow. We will see you back on March 1st. Have a good night.
All right. See you. Thank